Okay, we're going to have a look at Adobe Edge Reflow CC preview. This tutorial is made in March 2015. So we've opened up Reflow and we'll just lay up a simple header. So first of all, there's tools up at the top here. You have your selection tool, you have your box tool, which creates like divs, div boxes on your page. Then you have a text tool for making text boxes. Then you have an image tool, and then finally you have a button tool which also creates form elements as well. Further down you have your grid system, which is now showing you the grid system for the page element. Then you have the layout control, and then you have the styling for elements on your page. Over on the right side, if I click on any of these elements, it will expand. The first one is the outline view, which is all the elements you have in your page, and that works as a DOM, a document object model, so it will start to layer them and show how they're nested, parent and child elements, etc. The container is just a static sort of wrapper that Reflow gives you. Underneath that you have Adobe Edge Inspect, which you can hook up with a device and show how your design works on a device, tablet, phone, etc. You have library assets. This is empty because there aren't any assets on there, so you can reuse items and catalog them there. Then we have our page. You can add a new page, or you can duplicate a current page, which is the common thing you probably do if you're doing one of these projects. Make that as a template and then fill it up. Then you have the Photoshop Connect, where you can have a Photoshop file, so it's all layered, and you can sort of suck it in and bring it into Edge, usually by using the extract function in Photoshop CC. So that's just an outline I've set up here. I'm going for the 12 column grid. Depending on how large your monitor is, large monitors, this default page setting will expand to fill that up. You can, make it more manageable by bringing it into a certain size. This is just more or less a generic setup, and then you would actually set in media query points or break points later on. Okay, so we'll get going. So the first thing I'll do is to bring in some elements, but I'm just going to save my project. I've already created a site folder, so I'll just do a save as. I've got a site folder which is called Reflow site. I open that up. I have images in here which I'm going to use, so it's all tidy. So I will just come along and say Edge Animate Project. I'll just put _1 and I'll call it that, and I'll click and I'll just save the project in there. Right, now I'll bring in some images. Now you can bring in some images by just dragging and dropping them on the page, or you can come up here and you can get elements, and you can get elements from here, and then I've got my images, and you can bring them in to do that. Now if you bring in an image, if we come in here and we put an image on here, it sort of sticks to the cursor. We're moving it around, and as a default it has a static positioning, and also it's floating to the left, so you can see it gives you these sort of indications of where it is from the top and the left side of the page. Now when you want to leave it there, it's got a little bit of snap on there which will snap to a guide. You can let that go. Now because that's an image, it's come in here in the outline or the DOM over here, and it says image. Now ideally it's good to name things and call it face. Now the issue being is when you bring in elements, another way you can bring in an element is you can come in and say you want to bring in an image element. You can create a box or a div for it first. Now I know this is 300 pixels, so I come over to the layout, that is selected, and it's set at percentage at the moment. So I just make that to pixels, and the height is pixels there. Roughly I've dragged it out because I've done it in relationship to the image that I placed on here, so I know that. And I'll just type in 300 to make sure it is. So it's 300 square. Once I've done that, I will go to styling, and I'll go down and I'll click on the add image layer, and that creates a background image in that div, and you sort of have a little bit more control over it. So I can go up here, get another face, press open, then I can go down here and I can say no repeat, because that's quite important. You can't see the repeat. If I dragged it out, you'll see the repeat. If this was set on, it'll show you how that repeat. If I come over here, you've got something like that. That's not really what you want when you're doing this. So I will just go back and make sure I have that set at 300 after showing you that. So I've still got that highlighted. I can still come back, click on here, and all I'll do is say no repeat, and then I will also go to where it's got scaling, and I will just got cover. And what that means, it'll just fill up the size of the div or the box. We've made the div 300 and the image is 300, so nothing really happens. So we just make sure that it's all organized. So what we do is we have two images on here. Now if we look up here, it just says box, and the other one has face. So that's just an image on the page, and this one is an image inside a div tag. So you might have some more control when you do put images as background images within a div, rather than put them on the page just as an image. Might be different uses for that, but that's just two different ways of bringing in an image. Now I will just delete the image that I brought in, this face here, that's on its own, and I've got this image. Now what I can do up here is I'll just rename that, and now it's just a box. I'll call it face image. So I have my face image on there. Now I'll just bring it down. Now I want to sort of round the corners on this. Okay, I'm in styling, and what I want to do is to change the radius. Now I can actually type the radius in, or I can click here, it's like a scrubber element. So I'll just bring my image just a little bit over here to show you what's happening. And what I will do is just drag out to the right. It sort of works as, you know, a little scrubber. I keep my finger on the mouse and I sort of drag out, and you'll see it's made it round, keeps on going, and it will keep on going. I think it just carries on, and we've got a circle, right? Now what we need to do is, once we've done that, is we can move this down here, and I want to put a banner on the top. That's always important when you do this, to try and sort of keep your elements separate, and we'll see the reason why. We come up here and I get my another box or a div, and I drag out right across so all the way to the edge here, and then I let go. And once I let go, I will need to make sure I'm in the styling, and I just click on backgrounds here, and I'm going to add a color. So I'll just add it and make it nice red there. And once I've done that, you'll see over here it's called it box, and I'll keep it nice and semantic, and I'll call it header. So I have a header, and that's just a div header. Now I need to go to layout and make sure you see I haven't laid it up right to the top, and you'll see up here it's on the top margin, it's 58 pixels. Now I can move this up and down. If I just scrub across, I can move it up and down. That's pretty much a good way of doing things. In Reflow, use these good too. If you can use these by using the scrubber back and forward, or you can type elements in rather than dragging elements on the page. If they're nested, sometimes you have the issue dragging them out of where they're nested. So if they are nested in one another, if I drag my image up here, we have that nested inside the header. If I move this element around, you'll see it will pull it out. So sometimes that might happen. So you're trying to realign elements, and they sort of pop out of the parent elements or where they're nested. That can usually be fine in this case, but sometimes once you get lots of other elements on the page, once it pops out, Reflow starts to push other elements out the way, and it might mean your whole page frustratingly will all collapse. So I'm trying to be quite clever here and keep everything separate and have more control until I lay them up in the position I want. So yeah, I can scrub, or I can come along and say, yeah, I want it 0 pixels from the top, and that's good. So it's got that. And then up here it says 100%. If it didn't have 100%, had 105 or less, then what I could do is come along and say 100%. So that will mean it will drag out 100%. And all I need to do is do a preview. And how you do a preview, make sure you click off any element and make sure elements are not selected, and you press tab key, and here we have it. This gives you the preview. So see, it's going 100% and my object is down the bottom. So that's working quite nicely. I press the tab key, come back out again. Now with my image here, I will just bring him up and I'll put him roughly, you know, he's on the center of the page here, and put him on there. Now once I've got him on there, you know, you'll see I can have a background on that. I've got a moved him up, and what I need to do is just to create a border around that. So what I'll do is I'm in the styling, I will go down to the section here which is the borders within below the radius, and I will make a 2 pixel border, and I'll come up here and I'll select the color and make it white. When you select colors, you also have to, you know, I'm going to make it totally white, so drag up the shades and the opacity up, and you'll see I now have a thin border around there of 2 pixels. Now he's on the page, and you know, really ideally you might want to make sure it is the size, you know, he is in the center, so you would use the guides to get things centered up. So I put him on there. Now I'm going to put some information below, so I need to maybe drag this down a little bit further, and what I will do is I'll just put a name underneath. Now I'll just drag him out to begin with, to be honest, so he's not nested in there, and that gives me more control. And then I'll drag out a text box and put it underneath here. And once I've got the text box, I'll type in a word or a name. Now once I've done that, I can go over here and you'll see we've got typographical control. I'll leave it on black to begin with, but it's in M's. You can set it to pixels or percent. I'll leave it on M's, and I'll just drag out and I'll make it 4M. Now what I can do is have it centered inside the div. I move over here, and what I might do is just bring that in, right? And again, when we go to the layout, that element is static and it's floating to the left of the default element. Now those 2 elements are separate. Now if I shift click them, I can just put a parent element around it or put them inside a box without just making a box and them being in it. I go to the edit menu and I say add parent. I can also go to group if I wanted to, but I'll go to add parent. Now when it adds parent, you'll see now it's nested. See, it's over here, it's nested. Now the text says Jodo. Now I could change that and I could put in H1, and that's trying to keep a sort of semantic tags on them. Now it doesn't really create a tag. What it will do is everything will be div tags, div, 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 but what it will do is put a class of H1 and it'll put a class of header. So it will help you a little bit. Ideally, this Adobe mentioned that this is just a prototyping tool, not for making websites. So you know, you might be disappointed if you're trying to make a website and you know your code and it's not outputting it. It's just really doing prototyping in a design sense. Now once that's grouped together, when we move it around, you'll see here what we had before. It moves the element out of the parent element. So I'll just undo. So that's why you got to be very careful when you drag. Now what you can do is click on that element here, the main box, and you can use the arrow keys to nudge it, or you can come up here and you can use the margins to bring it up and put it in position if you wanted to. All right, that's one way of doing it. Or I can just get that box and I can drag it and I can drop it inside the header element, which might be a little bit better, because now, whereas before it was giving negative values from this position, now it's doing it from the top. Now once I've got there with that selected, you can use your arrow keys and move it up if you wanted to and get it into the position you would want it to be in. But bear in mind, dragging things, you might have problems in doing that. Now once I've done that, I'll click away from it and I'll press the tab key and I'll move it across Now a couple of different things, the Jodo's going a bit funny and also I want it white. So I'll come back here. Now first of all, I'll click on the Jodo, the H1, and what I'm going to do is down at in the layout, in float, I'll get it to be centered. Alright, so that'll center, which puts auto in the code. Then I'll click on the actual picture of the face, and again I'll go down to the in the layout, I'll go to the advanced, and I'll float that into the center. I'll click on the Jodo again, go to styling, and I'm going to change that and make it white. Now when you have chosen a color, it will put them in here, so whatever you've chosen in your project will actually keep them up here. So if you're using, you know, a color scheme, you know, it'll be available here, or you're building up a color scheme. Now the weight looks a little bit thick, and I can take the weight down, and it shows you here 100, and it shows you all the different weights it has. I'll take it down and make it 100. Now it's done that, and what I will do now is, again, I'll sort of press the tab key and I'll drag it in and I'll drag it out. So it's holding up a little bit more, but when we get here, you know, it's breaking a little bit on that size. Okay, so we'll go back again. Now you'll see when it comes in here, when you're doing it within the design element, you'll see it'll start to sort of push away from that. Now the reason that's happening with the text and not the image of the face is the image of the face is 300, so it's not squashing down in pixels, but the box we created, if we click on the box, I go to the layout, and if I look here, it's at 15%, so it's squashing it down. It can't squash the image because it's sort of static at 300, our box, but the other image, it's squeezing it down. Now what we could do is change that to pixels, and we could just make sure we kept that at 300. Okay, we've got that. Now, when I do it, I will come along here, and you will see it's staying nice and static as we bring it along and bring it in there. So that's going pretty well, and we'll bring it in, and it's doing that, and then I'll press the tab key, I'll bring it in here and out, and it's, you know, working reasonably well as we take it back and forward. Okay, so that's been set up. Okay, the next thing I'll do now is just I need to put a little sort of bar at the top to be like a navigation bar. So I will make sure I'm on the box because I need to move that down, and the best way, again, if I wanted to move it down a bit, I could just scrub it across here, or I could use the arrow keys to move the box down. That is a better way, as we've seen before, rather than dragging it once that's highlighted. So I've moved it down. Now the next thing is to just put another box on there. Again, I'm going to be quite cautious and put this underneath, and then I'll drag it or place it into position. I'll get a box on there and bring it up. Now the thing is, when I get to the layout, I need to make sure it is 100% of the window, and then I need to change its color. In the styling, I'm going to make it black, so I come down here and make sure it is black. It looks a little bit thin, and once I've got that, it says box. Rename it something nice and semantic, and I call it nav. Okay, I've just got it here. Now what I can do is I can just grab that, because it's one element, and take it all the way up and put it right at the top, and you'll see it'll nest it inside here. Now if you want to take things out, you can actually, you know, just pull them across here, and you can actually drag them down and drag them out. Sometimes it's a bit tricky, you've got lines, but if I've got it there, I can sort of pull it across and tug it out, if you see what's happening there. So I can bring it up. Sometimes these are pretty tricky to move them around, and sometimes, you know, like there, it'll snap it into the wrong position, and then if I move it, I can move it out, and I'll just bring it up. So you have to just be careful of how these elements go around and how they push other objects out of the way. So I've got my nav bar there, and they're both nested in here with my box. So instead of calling that box, I'll call that hero image. So that's my box called hero image, and then I've got my nav bar. So my nav bar's up at the top, and let's have a little preview and see how that behaves now. Take it in and take it out, so that's looking quite nice. With my box, my hero image, I'll just nudge it a little bit, try and get it a little bit more in the center there, because it's, I think I've got 1900, so I'll do it 950 and put it in the center. Now once I've got that, I'll just go tab, and when I bring it in, it should be a bit more sort of centered along there, right? So that's looking good. And then what I will do now is I will put on a menu bar item. Now I'm just going to mock this up. I'm not going to create them into buttons. I'm just going to show how the menu bar would look, and I'm going to create a text box underneath here. I'm going to type in home, and then I'll do a couple of spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4 I'll do about, and I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll do put in contact. Then I'll just make them slightly a bit bigger. I think I'll make 1.4M. Well, it's gone back a bit. I'll just type in 1.5, I think. 1.5, that'll do. I've got that. And then I'll use the select tool, and I will just bring in the box a bit, and I'll have it centered in that box. That might help my layout. So I've got it here. You'll see down at the bottom it's named it what I've typed in it, and I'll just type in links. All right. Now once I've got that, I can have that in my nav bar. Now I can click on here and drag it up, but if I got that, I drag it up and I drag it right on top of my nav bar here. I'll just pull it to one side. So you'll see now it's nested in my nav bar. Now with it selected, I will go over and click on the typography section where it has color, and I'll just click on there white because I've used that before, and you'll see it's put it on there. A little bit heavy, so I'll take the weight down and make it a little bit thinner. So this is a representation of my links on a nav bar. Again, I'll press tab and come back and see how that works. So we drag it in and drag it out, and you'll see, oh man, look at that, it's collapsing a bit. So I'll come back out again, put it on here. I'll just drag out my window a little bit more on here. Now what I need to do here is, you'll see it's floating to the left. That's how I know. And where you've got the floats in the layout, you've got the floats here, it's floating to the left. What if we floated it to the right? Now you know that because the force field sort of around it, the margin changes. Okay, so as we see this is happening, it's collapsing the design, and the reason being is with that box selected, if we look over here where the size is, it's got percentage. Now that's what you might want with some text, but with this text, it's sort of pushing out into the actual part of our banner on here. So I need to change that around a little. So what I need to do is change that and make it into pixels. Once I've made it into pixels, it does this. It stays together, it stays solid and doesn't break up, right? Okay, now if I hit the tab key, you can see again in the design element it's doing this sort of stuff. So all looks pretty good so far, and we come back in here to those sizes. Now what I'll do is I'll bring up this hamburger or hot dog menu item. So I will bring in that image, and again the best way of doing it is probably getting a div, dragging a div out and having it the size you roughly going to have it. So I'll just drag out a div box here, or a box. I'll make sure it is square by going over the section pixels, and let's see if I make it something about 40 by 40. Once I've done that, I will get a background image, styling, background image to bring that in. I will just go up a bit back into my reflow, and I've got a menu underscore, that's an SVG, it's white so you can't see the preview, and I bring it in here, but you see the preview there. I need to have it no repeat, and I need to have the scaling cover, so that'll make sure it covers and scales to the right size. Now once I've got that, I will just bring it up and put it up on here, but I'll just nudge my text a little bit out of the way there, and then I'll take this up and just put it on here on the, now you see I think it's cut off a little bit, so if I try to drag that out a little bit and have it on there, and we've got that, and take the size down a bit, there we go, on the size. Okay, so we've got that hot dog element up on there, and again if we press a preview, here with a representation of it, we can bring it in and bring it out, and it's on there. Now that's just to place it on there. When we move our sort of media queries, we will sort of change those around. So where I've now got my, it says box, I'll say ham menu. So it gives me an idea that's a hamburger menu, and that's now nested inside my links. Now I can just move the links over a little bit on that, and I might move the hot dog menu along here like that. Now what I can do, you'll see it's floating to the left. I'll come back down here, I'll get that hamburger menu to float to the right, so they're both floating to the right. Looks a bit messy, but they'll be turned off in a minute. Now once I've placed that on there, that's sort of my header done. Now what I'm not going to do in this tutorial is go through the other page elements, but what you would do is put on other page elements in the default before you do the next step, which is media queries. Now if you put things on later after you've made the media queries, things will get messy. So what you would do is lay out all the page, which we'll look at in another tutorial, just focusing on doing this header element to see how it works, to give you a good overview. Now once that's done and I've laid that up, obviously you'll have the rest of the page elements. We're just going to focus on this header. I will now put some media queries on here, or breakpoints. Now there isn't a set size to do breakpoints on media queries if you're doing responsive design for devices. Usually as you drag things in, especially with Reflow, the minute the design breaks, put a media query in and a media query in and another once, and then rearrange the layout on each of those media queries. That's probably the best way of doing it, rather than coming along and saying this is one for a mobile, this is one for a tablet. You know, you will have those in mind, ideally large, medium and small, that you'll be designing to, but you can put intermediate ones in between those, and certainly you're not coming along and saying, okay, I'm designing for 400 pixels or 1,000 pixels. They're just rough relative sizes you're sort of targeting. Now I've done that, I'll put some media queries on here. So first up, I will just say get a sort of a larger one, and I could go for a small and bring them all the way along here. So first of all, okay, so if we come up to where it's got the plus and I click and keep my finger on the mouse, it will bring up the what breakpoints you've set on there. We've only got a default, right? So I'll put some breakpoints on there. So if I click plus, we have this breakpoint, and what we will do is got some little arrows showing it's going from the left side. You can do it the other way around, when you design mobile first and have it come from the right, but it's on the left side. And once I've done that, I can sort of adjust it and bring that breakpoint in. So say for example I want to start off with, say, something like 1200 pixels on here. Now I've got 1200 pixels, and what I will do, you know, you can have 1200, so when you go back you've got this or you've got that. But say for example I want to come down and do this, say 500, so you can bring it around about 500. I've got 500. Now what I can do is, once I've got that, is you can go back out again. I can, by clicking on the default, and I click another plus, and this time I'll bring that in, and this one I'll make 1,000. Just that, right? And I'll click on the default again, and I'll click on another one, and I'll make this one 1,500. Okay, there it is. So what I've got is I've got this, which is 500, and I've got those. So I've got those 3 breakpoints and then the default. Now what happens is the order everything's in here, that order or that hierarchy should remain the same throughout all those breakpoints. So that's a rule. Don't try and move things around. You move one around and it will change everything on everything else. You need to lay everything out on the DOM or the outline or the default before you start putting the breakpoints and rearranging everything. Introducing new elements later will cause big problems for you, so make sure everything's laid out. Now, what I will do is I will come along and say I'm here at the 1500 breakpoint. Okay, I'm going to turn off the hamburger menu. Now try and make sure you don't have these elements sort of overlapped really, so you might have some problems there. So I've got them just side by side. They can be behind each other if you wanted to, but I've just got them here, just make it easy. So I turn off on this breakpoint, I turn off the hamburger menu, and because it's floating to the right, it just covers it over. Now I go to the here, and we've got those different ones on there, and if we come along here to the last one, which could be on mobile sort of setting, it's on here. Now we want to turn this off, so if I click up here and I turn off my links, and hopefully if I can turn my hamburger menu on, it's on here. It's a little bit too close to the edge, so I will nudge it using the arrow keys and move it along. Now ideally when I click on the other elements, the other breakpoint, which is the 1000 and 1500, it shouldn't be on there. If we get there, they're both on there on the default. That's fine. Right, so if I come back to this breakpoint, you'll see old Joe Doe there, he's not necessarily in a good position. So what I will do is I'll just close that up and go for the hero image. I'll click on that, it'll highlight it all. And what I can do is do a number of things. Up here, he's floating to the left. I could do, on this breakpoint, just get him to be auto-centered, right? So that'll auto-center him in those two different points. Auto-centering on the default's not a good idea because he'll fly out to thousands of pixels right off your screen. But here, because this is confined in this media query, it looks okay on that. Now I'll just click away, so I've got nothing selected, press a tab. Here we have that breakpoint, here we have this breakpoint, and here we have the final breakpoint there. And then if we go to default, you'll see it looks a little bit messy. Default's just a working part of that. If I press the tab key and get back. Now that looks okay for that. Now if we look at this breakpoint, again, what I can do is click on the hero image over here, which selects all that. And I can again come down to the advanced and in the float, get it to auto center, and he will auto center within there. Okay, now once I come along to 1000, again I can come along here and quite happily make sure I've got the hero image element selected, and I can then obviously center on that again. So how this works now, if we press the tab key, here we have that breakpoint, here we have this, and here we have the final one where it disappears. So we can drag this out, and you'll see as it drags, it will do that. So there's not a lot of sort of changes going on, but you'll see that's how you can do a breakpoint to show and hide elements, and also rearrange elements on those different breakpoints. So it's quite simple to do as long as you laid out all your page elements to begin with, and then start to rearrange them. Now another thing I could do is I could come along here and go to this final one, which is the last one. And what I could do is, for example, I could turn off the Joe Doe. So I click on the Joe Doe, I could turn it off. So on this breakpoint, I turn him off. And on all the other breakpoints, it's on. I could turn him back on that breakpoint. I could go to styling. I could, with that box selected or div, I click and I can change the color to something else. So change his name to something else, yellow. And at the other breakpoints, it stays white. Now I come back again. I click here. I select the color white that I already had. And I come back over and say on the DOM, which is the default, say I change this to yellow. Now change it to yellow on default, and see what happens. When I change it on the default, it changes it right through the design. except here I've then specified certainly another color, so that's how that works. So that's overriding that, so I could come along and because I changed it to that, it's sticking with that because I've specified it. So that's what you need to be aware of. Whatever you change, it highlights it here. So if I come along, whatever goes, so that little purpley color has been changed on that breakpoint, so it says purple. Now if I come over here on the blue and say I wanted to change this Jodo to whatever, let's see, more of a, okay, a sort of a purpley color here. I change that. Now what you'll see is it will sort of go for that bluey color, and when we come over here we got that. So we'll try and show you what's been changed, and it relates to the colors up here. And certainly if we went to green, if I change the text to a certain color, it will sort of give a little bit of a greeny shade. Might be hard to pick it up, but that's what it's doing. So it shows you, okay, that's relating to the up there. Okay, so real simple how to do that. It can be a bit finicky, certainly naming them, laying them out to begin with on the default, and turning elements on and off. And that's a simple way of just creating this banner header, and gives you a bit of an idea of how the media queries or breakpoints work in relationship to your design, and switching elements on and off and moving them around within each of those media query points or breakpoints.